You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins. Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of the podcast in which we obsess over the details in punk, hardcore, indie rock, emo, metal, whatever subgenre it is, as long as it's of the DIY variety. That is what we dive deep into and hopefully get to know the people who are documenting it, creating it, participating in a deep way. And today, of course, is no exception, right? Maybe if I learned how to speak. I'm really excited about today's guest because he's an old friend who I haven't spoken to in many years, but Jimmy Stadt. He is the vocalist from Polar Bear Club. He also plays in a new band called Shy Tooth, which I will link in the show notes. Rochester, New York, and I love Polar Bear Club. I worshipped at their altar for their entire existence. They started putting out music in the mid-2000s, I want to say. Really captured the independent music world's attention for probably the better part of 4 or 5 years. And then, life gets in the way. Touring starts to grind you down, and, they disbanded, I want to say 2013, 2014. I could be completely wrong about that. But if you've not listened to Polar Bear Club, you should. You should rectify that immediately. Of course, I will put a link in the show notes to where you can consume their music. But I wanted to converse with Jimmy because I think he is an intelligent dude. I always enjoyed having conversations with him at shows. But I think he'll have a very interesting, and he did have an interesting perspective on the way that the band went and how much experience he took from that informs his life now and his creative output now. It's a great discussion. So stick around for a moment and you will be able to hear that. You can always support the show just by simply emailing 100wordspodcast@gmail.com, whether it's guest ideas or whatever's on your mind. Dump it in the inbox. I promise we'll get back to you. We, as in me, I will get back to you. And also, you can leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or simply leave a rating on Spotify. All of those things help this show get delivered algorithmically to the people who need to listen to it. And also, I have to pontificate for a moment here because doesn't it feel like a bizarre world we live in now with artificial intelligence? Obviously, AI, everybody is speaking about it in some capacity, whether it's changing the work that you do, whether it's changing the creative output. All of these tools exist now in ways that we will not be able to really understand the impact on until years later. But there's one specific thing that I noticed recently that is, it's just disturbing. It bums me out in a very real way. I'm sure you saw on the internets the band that is fully AI. They're called The Velvet Sundown. And I know I probably shouldn't give a computer a recommendation, but the reason that this, I know, affected me and affected many people around me, where it's like, this is a band that is completely created out of whole cloth from AI, from their picture, all of the music. They're releasing new music, like putting out records, like all of this stuff is generated from AI. And I realize that this is probably an experiment from somebody creative, but holy moly, does this feel just weird and sad to exist in a world in which our human experience and expression can be reduced down to like a prompt. And I know that horse is out of the barn. Like there's no way that we can reverse course and change the fact that this exists in the world now. But I don't know, like claw back some humanity, whatever it is that you are doing. If you feel uncomfortable with in any way, shape, or form, like don't do it. And you don't have to feel like you need to play with the rat race in order to keep up with whatever's happening out there. I was joking around with a friend at work today where we were thinking it's like, man, that's why the basement shows and the DIY scene is always going to be vital, because there's always going to be the pushback against these things that feel just the antithesis of being human, which for many reasons is absolutely the case. So anyways, that is just like I said, a pontification, something that was on my brain that I know is impacting many people from either the creation of actual podcasts or the creation of actual music or, video games or films, all of these things we hold dear. So keep your expression weird and unique and wild and maybe not through algorithms, maybe, or not algorithms, but computer programs. You get it. You get it. So anyways, let's talk about weekly recommendations. This is the spot in the show where I just talk about music that I have either recently discovered or a new release or old release, anything in between. I will compile them into a playlist where you will be able to click on a link in the show notes, and then you'll be able to consume said music. And it's a running playlist, so I keep adding to it. This week's ad is the newest Dead Guy record called Near Death Travel Services. This came out on Relapse, and holy moly, it has no right being as good as it is, but it is. It's so unbelievably good. It basically picks up where Fixation on a Coworker left off, and I absolutely love it. I am thrilled with the fact that the band can be as vital some 30 years later as what they were when they were, much younger human beings. It is a quick punch to the throat, and I love it for that. So if you've never listened to Dead Guy, rectify that immediately. You can definitely dig into the newest record because it's well worth your time, but also listen to all their old stuff as well because Dead Guy is just an incredible band. I had Tim Singer, the vocalist, on many, many years ago. Maybe I'll have him back just for fun. I try not to do repeat guests, but when people have creative output that prompts me to have them on again, I will. So anyways, there you go. Weekly recommendation. Now let's talk to Jimmy Stadt from Polar Bear Club. And like I said, he has a new band called Shy Tooth that's really, really good. Well worth your time checking out. A link will be in the show notes as well. So let's talk to Jimmy now.
Hey, I'm scared enough. Fight down, 'cause everyone's looking.
We obviously live in the era where our phones constantly remind us of past events and other things that we have participated in. And I definitely have a very fun photo that pops up occasionally when you guys played the Glass House Record Store here in Southern California back in, I don't even know what year, forever ago. But the show, why it was important, I think, was just and I'm sure that, and I know you've articulated this in other interviews before, but it was so cool to watch you guys rolling through for, if I'm not mistaken, the first time out to California, and the warm embrace of the band. Like everybody immediately got the assignment and was like, oh yes, Polar Bear Club is great and everybody needs to go off. And the show was great.
Did you just post video of that to Instagram as well? Because just last week, someone sent me a video from that, one of those the Glass House shows on Instagram. Someone tagged me in it and I missed it. And I was looking at my tags. I was like, oh, what is this? And I just sat and watched it today. It's so funny that you bring that up. But yeah.
That is funny. No, I did not. I think what I have is just like a picture of me yelling right in your face, as one does, obviously. But the reason I bring that up and travel down the memory lane aspect is just the fact that I felt, and I know, like I said, you've articulated this other interviews where the white hot attention that was paid to the band, almost at the jump from the first EP, felt probably very jarring for you guys because you had all played in other bands and you had all experienced this. You weren't spring chickens, so to speak. So as you were kind of like receiving that attention, I know it's easy in the moment because the show was fun and it's exciting and stuff. What sort of conversations were going on with you guys as you were starting to be like, oh, I guess people are paying attention to us? Like, how was that kind of ping-ponging around in the van and, in your own heads?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about that because I don't think I, for years, fully appreciated how unique that scenario was. For years after, did I not understand and look back and realize that's not how it goes for everybody. That was a unique experience. Now, there are pros and cons to it, for sure. The pros are obvious, right? I mean, having great shows and doing well, that's the big pro. The cons, I think, more so on the side of like, it sets a high bar out of the gate, and then you kind of have to maintain that for a longer time, or that's like the standard that you have. But anyway, we can talk more about that later. To your question, I don't think we really talked about it very much, at least to my recollection. I think we were, I was maybe 23-ish at that time. We had an age range in the band, so we had a couple guys at least close to who were already in their 30s at that time. So we had a bit of an age range. We were just goofing around in the van. That's pretty much all we did. There was no like planning. There was no like, strategy. It also historically occupied an interesting space in music history, I think, at least to our perspective, this time be- between like social media, and I think nowadays it's so much more understood and the norm that you are your own masters, and you have to be your own brand, and you have to be your own. You can have the power to make it all, and I don't think we ever did fully understood that. I think we were just a bunch of goofballs goofing around in the van and figured maybe at some point someone would come along and steer our ship, and until then we were just going to have fun and play fun shows. So we didn't really talk about it, at least from a sense. We talked about it a little bit more at home before we started touring, because it happened here in Rochester first, where, you know, to your point, we were all in bands since we were young. I mean, I was in my first band, I think 14 or 15, and I haven't stopped doing it since. And so, yeah, we had a lot of experience, and we knew sort of what to expect. Polar Bear Club started exceeding those expectations locally first. And I think that's more so when we had some of those conversations of like, this is really weird. This is very strange. People from like the other side of that was our this was our big barometer. People from the other side of town know who we are. That was strange to us. I think we were at a party once, and we were talking to some people from the west side, and we were from the east side. This is how Rochester's kind of broken up. And we were just talking to some west siders, and they were like, "Oh my God, you're in that band Polar Bear Club? Oh my God." And we were like, first off, how are there people that know us that we don't know? Right.
Yep.
That was, I think, was the first time. And that was early. That was probably, I mean, a couple years before we even got to the California era that you're talking about. And so we had some of those conversations, I think, initially around town. But at that point, when we were on that tour, we were kind of like, isn't this great? Like this is what touring and shows are. And it's great. We're starting off on such a great foot. This is just so great and easy and fun. But I don't think we at that point were talking about like our meteoric rise or what have you. I think
Here's the future.
maybe even a little cockiness about it too. Just like, yeah, we had gotten used to it back home. And now, this is just what it's like out in the world, right? This is just what it should be. This is the norm. So no, we didn't talk about it at all.
Right, right. Well, I wanted to dig in on the Rochester aspect of it too, just because that town to me has always been fascinating because of the size, but then also the fact, like, here's me, a person in Southern California who is like familiar with the Rochester scene, where being like, dude, Ed Gein and Marathon and Achilles, and it's like, I mean, granted, of course, like people like you and I just get obsessed with stuff and we fall into rabbit holes, but just like Rochester, and then, you had a venue like the Bug Jar that was very important. Why do you think Rochester was able to, like, I guess, carve its own space in the shadow of, Buffalo and Syracuse and all these other places that had very vibrant hardcore scenes, but was like, oh, Rochester is a little bit different, which I know sounds obvious, like every city is different, but Rochester had this unique flair to it.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
And we, I think, of the three places, us, Buffalo, and Syracuse, I think we recognize that in ourselves as well. Like people from Rochester think Buffalo and Syracuse. We all know what each other's different flavor is, and we talk about that. But I'm glad you mention it, because I am, incredibly proud to live where I live and be from where I am. And I wouldn't necessarily at this point leave here for anything. And I just don't even stand for any hate towards my city from an outsider. There's been, coming across my TikTok algorithm has been these videos of like people traveling to horrible cities and coming and shaming them and making fun of them. There was one on Rochester that came across my feed, and I was red with anger. Just like, just shut up. Just shut up. Anyway, so yeah, a lot of pride about where I'm from, but what makes it unique, I mean, really, it's just the people and the time. I mean, maybe everyone thinks this, but I sort of, for what you're asking about and what you're talking about, shows and hardcore and punk, um, I think when I was actively going to shows, playing local shows, when I first was a teenager, if someone was to be capturing the history of this town scene, which kind of someone is kind of doing in some capacity, but they would, I think, talk about that as some sort of golden era. I mean, it really had to do with the people booking shows. There were two guys booking shows at that time. One was my to-be bandmate when I played in a band called The Disasters. His name was John 25. And the other guy was Josh Lyons. And they had these kind of competing booking. I don't want to call them companies because they didn't make any money, but like these competitive like booking camps. And I think they kind of started competing with one another for booking shows. So that it was really their doing that brought a lot of that brought a lot of the bands, to Rochester in those early days. And then from there, we got tastes of things from others. I mean, Bane came through here all the time. Strike Anywhere came through here all the time. And I think we just were able to pick up on different flavors of hardcore and thusly, make it ourselves and feel a little bit more legitimate in that. We never thought about Rochester as any different kind of city. We had this strange connection with Baltimore too, and Baltimore hardcore. I don't know how that was fostered. I was kind of, when I got here, it was already kind of set up, but we kind of just thought of ourselves as a city like Baltimore, a city like that size and as legitimate, and as major or minor, whatever you want to call it. We didn't think of it any differently, but the colleges helped too, because at the time I was going to shows, there was a lot of kids from Boston at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and from other areas of the Northeast. So they brought kind of Boston hardcore with them. And sort of that plus just the determination of these two bookers to get good bands to come through Rochester. I think that's really what just sparked it. And, it's like any place in the Northeast, there's not a lot to do, especially in the winter. And it's just kids are starved for that sort of thing. And you've got the sort of budding internet, the message boards was a really big thing here too, as it was in other areas. And it just really flourished. It's different now for sure. There's still semblances of that. And there's still a music scene here. Maybe not necessarily as hardcore and punk as it was then, but certainly alternative and indie and like psychedelic rock is really, kind of big here now. But totally because of the foundations laid by those early days of DIY shows.
That's cool. I always had this conception of, because you like to, compare scenes or whatever in regards to like the type of bands that are coming from certain areas, even though there's a wide swath of sounds. I just always looked at Rochester as being kind of like, oh, it's like Gainesville adjacent. It's like Gainesville obviously has a lot of stuff going on, the college town aspect of it. There's all these different styles. But there was this through line in a respect. I never thought about the Baltimore comparison, but I could easily see what you're pulling from on that side of things too.
I think like if you asked, maybe this is slightly off, but if you asked someone from this Tri-City area to explain the other cities from like, I don't know, just a music perspective, Syracuse would be tough, like beat down hardcore tough. Buffalo would be maybe a little chaos unhinged every time I die, kind of thing. And I think Rochester, to those two comparisons, if you ask someone from those two places to describe Rochester, they would describe it as a little maybe artsy, maybe even crunchy. There was a big influx of that kind of like hippie-ish, crunchy scream, vegan screamo, like that sort of thing. Like You and I and The Assistant and those bands came through a bunch. And I think we sort of, or like Page 99 came through a bunch too.
Yeah.
And I think that became like Rochester's thing amongst the three. We were kind of the nicer ones, the less tough ones,
Right.
and the more moralistic ones. I mean, there were protests at shows when I was younger about like flyers. I remember there was once a protest at a show about like a flyer that had a naked woman on it or something, and it was I think I'm misremembering it a little bit, but like we were the moralists, and I'm
Sure.
so thankful for that now in my life. But I think that's how at that time that's how we would have all described each other.
Sure. The differentiators. Because, and
Yeah,
truthfully, it's like even though all of those are geographically relatively close to one another, it's like the
an
same.
hour apart, an
Right.
hour. Yeah,
Right. And it's like, but they, to your point, they need to carve their own lanes because it's not like everybody is going to be like, oh, yes, here's, Syracuse version 2.0 and 3.0. It's like, oh, we need to find our own thing in the way that every music scene kind of, they'll have an identity. A lot of other stuff is going to be wrapped up into it. But this is kind of, the, the Buffalo blue collar versus the, crunchy granola of Rochester, like totally makes
collegey
sense.
town, and
Yeah.
like I don't know how it starts, but it just starts by the ones that are calling the shots. I mean, when I was 15 or 16, I was hanging out with like the 22 and 25-year-olds that were running the scene, and I took my cues from them. I just was like, what do these guys think? That's what I think. And luckily enough, they had good heads on their shoulders.
As always, I'm thrilled to welcome our friends at Rockabilia.com because they want you to save 10% off your first order by using the promo code 100 words or less. That's the number 100 words or less on your first order. And it gets you that sweet 10% off. Now, what do? They sell officially licensed merch, which that means if your favorite hardcore band or metal band or mainstream rock band is selling merch online and it's bootlegged, don't buy it. Straight up, don't buy it. Go to rockabilia.com, search your favorite band, and you will be able to find a bunch of great stuff. I love this company so much. Ships from the Midwest here in the United States. It gets to you lickety split. I know no one says lickety split, but I like to. So I'm going to go ahead and keep using that. And if you ever have any problems, their customer service is so good. I actually experienced it recently. There was like a little shipping delay on something, and I hit them up and they were like, oh yeah, actually here, this is the updated shipping. And here's it got upgraded to, 2-day overnight or whatever. I love Rockabilia and I think you will as well. So go to rockabilia.com, use the promo code 100 words or less, 10% off your first order. Please go shopping for rad merch. I know that as you were, growing up and kind of just, experimenting with who you were as a human, like everybody does when they're in their junior high and high school and stuff like that. I know music started to capture you probably, like you said, 13 or 12, 13 years old, where it really started to reveal itself. And then the punk and hardcore rabbit hole opened up for you. The fact that you were drawn to playing music relatively early in that, where do you pull that interest from? Like, was it, I know you liked music, but like, were your parents encouraging for you being like, oh, here's the guitar, like, here's the things that you need to do in order to put it together?
Yeah, they were. I think they were one part encouraging and another part concerned.
Sure.
Because I just didn't take to anything when I was a kid. I rebelled against things. Not like rebellious like you might think, but I didn't want to do much. I didn't want to play sports. I didn't want to, I was okay at school, middle of the road student. I just didn't have a thing. I didn't have anything that I necessarily excelled at. But music was a part of my life growing up. My mother was a piano teacher, and my dad isn't a musician, but he does have he's very into music and has taste, and he's a vinyl collector now. And his musical taste was more like he loved like Frank Zappa is probably I feel like is his favorite band, but Bowie and the Bee Gees he loved, and Talking Heads, and a lot of like artsy, new wavy, like good rock, So kind of a combination of the two. Um, my mom's piano teaching is what gave me, I think, the brain for music, because I got home from school and my mom taught piano in our house. And it was like, everyone's got to be quiet in the house because mom's teaching piano in the other room, and you can hear it everywhere in the house. And I just that's how I grew up. And specifically, that gave me a really, really great patience for music because I grew up. So this might be torture to some people, but it just doesn't bother me. I mean, every day I would hear dee 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 blah, blah, blah. Start again.
Right.
Dee 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 blah, blah, blah. You know, all day, every day, that's what I would hear, and I just kind of got used to messing up. And so I think at face value, I'm very comfortable messing up at music, and that's just patience, and that's what you kind of need to write a song, right? And to get through it, you know. So I think that had a lot to do with it, but specifically sort of punk and hardcore. I don't know. It just made sense to me. It was like the first time I saw it, you know, it was like lightning striking. I can't explain it. There's no good psychological reason, but I remember the first time it felt like alive and awake in me was when I first heard Rage Against the Machine in like 8th grade or whatever it was. And it just completely captured every cell in my body. I just was like, specifically the Bulls on Parade music video, the concert footage, watching that, it just excited me so much. I became obsessed with it, and I like seeing those performances and like the way the crowd is reacting. It was like, how do I get there? How do I get to that spot? And that it just was, you know, who I was. It just happened. I don't know why.
Yeah. And how cool is it when you then discover Inside Out and you're just like, wait, so Zach was in a band before this? And
Yeah.
like when you start to piece all that together and he was like, wait, he played guitar in Hard Stance? Like, you're just like, oh my God, music is the best.
Yeah, and that's really it's endlessly fascinating. You know, you can go down those rabbit holes in every circumstance. And the fact that I kind of wanted to and sought that out, I think told my parents like, oh, he's really passionate about this. We've never seen this kind of passion in him before. And so like, who cares? We don't understand it necessarily. Let's just go with it. And I think they got me my first guitar shortly. Well, yeah, no, it must have been 6th grade or 7th grade or so while that was happening. They get me my first guitar at 12 and I just disappeared. I closed the door to my bedroom, turned on the amp, and I never stopped. I just played all day, every day, instantly trying to write songs. That was instantly what I was trying to do. I was never interested in like shredding or learning scales. I just wanted to write songs, and I don't know why. It just was there.
Yeah, that's incredible. And to your point too, the concern that is from parents in regards to their kids starting to bring home weird music or weird ideas where it's like, hey, this is what vegetarianism is and all this sort of stuff. It sounds like they were, I guess, cautiously supportive. They were just like, I don't know what Jimmy's bringing home, but I guess as long as he's not being harmful to himself, this is okay.
Yeah, you know, I don't want to paint my parents in any sort of puritanical light. They were not. My dad is a hippie. He dropped out of high school, hitchhiked to Phoenix from New York. You know, he is.
He likes Zappa. I mean, that's all you need to say.
Exactly. Need I say more? And that's who he is through and
Right.
through. And my mom, I think, was not puritanical, but just anxious. And I think the like aggression and violence of some of it scared her. Like I remember she took away like my Deftones cassette when I was younger, you know, and it just because the content, you know, scared her. So never any sort of religious or conservatism in any way, shape, or form. More just kind of fear. And honestly, that maybe made me like it more, you know, because it was just stoking fear. And I knew there was like power in that. And I never like misunderstood it. I fully understood like like if Korn had a song in it that mentioned rape, I fully understood that rape was still bad, you know, but that was their concern, was that, you know, I would hear that song and think bad things were good. But yeah, I don't know. I've always my Rochester in the mainstream of Rochester, outside of the punk and hardcore, is a very hippie town. I'll give you an example of that. So I don't know if you're familiar with that Van Gogh exhibit that like toured Immersive Van Gogh.
Yep.
And so it came to Rochester maybe 5 years ago. And in the gift shop was a tie-dye t-shirt of the Grateful Dead logo with Van Gogh's face just photoshopped inside the skull. That is what Rochester is, like mainstream Rochester. So I think there was a bit of like, and the cool kids in my high school, like the jocks, were hippies. They liked Fish. They liked Grateful Dead. They liked Steppenwolf. They liked Dave Matthews Band. Those were what the jocks in my school were into. And I think part of that too was sort of like, I don't get that. I'm going this way. I'm rebelling against that. I think there was a little bit of that sort of infusing it too.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the, I guess, proverbial life plan for you, in regards to like, this is what I'm going to do for a career? I mean, because I know you went to college and everything, because Polar Bear Club started, it was shortly after you graduated college, or in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We started touring full time after undergrad. Yeah.
Got it. So what was the angle there? Like, what was the hope for you?
I was going to be an actor, actually. I went to acting school.
Okay.
And, so aside from like discovering music at the time that I did, I also discovered film and theater. And that's pretty much, those two things are pretty much just all I am, is a guy who really likes film and plays and television, and a guy who really likes music, certainly also a father and a husband and all those things. But like, boil it all down, and I'm either thinking about music or I'm thinking about film. And so my high school life leading into college, I knew I was going to do one of those two things. And so I was sort of deciding between going to school for recording like engineering, or going to school for acting. And I think just for some reason in my mind, I thought one would pay off more. I thought going to school for acting would be more rewarding, and I'd have more chance of like making a go at it and actually like making a living at it. So I almost arbitrarily just picked that. And then I went to school for that. And funnily enough, by the time I was done with undergrad, studying the other passion of my life, Polar Bear Club was getting immensely popular. And so literally the second I graduated college, did a complete 180 back to music and became a professional touring musician. There's more context as to why we did it when we did it, but
Of course.
but that was the plan. Is I was going to graduate from college, I was going to move to New York City, and I was going to start auditioning. That was what I had planned, and just was going to see where it went. And then PBC took off, and it just was like, this is here now. And I could, let me just go see what happens. Let's just see how it goes. And there we went.
Right. Well, and effectively, you are auditioning every single night with your band in front of people. So it's like the connective tissue is clearly there, like you said, where it's like there's, yes, it's both.
I'm maybe
arts,
painting them more as like, I was an accountant in a rock band. No, they're still on the arts track. They're not diametrically opposed. Yeah.
No, but it is funny where it's just like, oh yes, I was pulled in this other direction, that it's just like, oh yeah, it's a slightly different, shade of chartreuse. It's like, oh yeah.
I think I maybe describe it that way because I think that in some way was how I thought of it then, is because I was a musical person, but I didn't do musical theater necessarily. And everyone always kind of was like, why not? You make music, you can sing. Why wouldn't you do it? It's like, that doesn't scratch the itch for me. I was a very serious acting track, like Sam Shepard, David Mamet, like really very serious actor at that time in my life. And they were kind of these separate things. And I held them separately because they were always kind of intertwined though. When I was in college, PBC was sort of going, but not like ramping up. And I didn't really hang out with the people in my degree program. I hung out with the band people. I hung out with the music people, and we went to shows and we played music, and then I went off and did my plays. So they were always kind of interwoven, but they felt separate to me, and maybe that was by design for me. I maybe liked that to a degree. I could keep the things separate, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I think that desire that you speak of, the influence that can be played in be consuming different pieces of art, like that's, I mean, truthfully, I'm very glad that Polar Bear Club never wrote a full record about life on the road, because it's like, like every band runs into that, where it's like their second or third record and they're just being like, well, what do I sing about? Like, well, probably just the van and tour, and so, because that's all we know.
And we have those songs, and we have those moments of song, and it became increasingly challenging to not do that. And I think also that was a little bit foreshadowing the end, also, when that challenge started becoming more pervasive.
Yeah, exactly. And so with the, experience of you, singing in a band, and like that, especially describing your background there of, acting and being in front of people, that was relatively probably easy for you to do. But then in kind of expanding your vocal abilities and being like, oh yes, like, yes, I'm not screaming. Yes, I'm not singing. I'm shouting in tune. Like, was that, I guess I'm sure it was an exciting process for you. Was there fear attached to it as well, in regards to being like, can I actually pull this off, like, for longer periods of time? Or was it just like, well, I'm learning as I'm going?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I always had a lot of fear about my voice on the road. I mean, the voice of Polar Bear Club was discovered. It wasn't designed. It wasn't like, this is the plan, let's do this. It was, we're in the studio making really, really sharpened on, sometimes things just disappear. Redder the Better is transition point, and it has that still. But the actual like voice of PBC really came into the light and crystallized on sometimes, at least in my view. And that happened because it was just not working. Like, what we were trying was not working. I wasn't able to really sing the melodies that I wrote in the way that I wanted to sing them. It wasn't expressive in the way we wanted it to be expressive. And at a certain point, it was just like, well, we don't have money to be in this studio indefinitely. I think we were in that studio for 10 days. I think that's what we had the budget for. Maybe more. I might be misremembering that, but I think it was 10 days. And it was like, just scream as loud as you can and get your way through it, man.
Yep.
Just get through it. That's how that came to be. It wasn't like we should try something like this. It was just survive this, really. So yeah, of course, fears about being able to recreate it live, being able to maintain it live. But at first it was easy. When I was younger, it was easy. It was always the same sort of pattern. It was like, first night of tour was okay. Second night, amazing. Third night, voice completely shot. Fourth night and on, totally fine. That was always the pattern that it kind of went with little ups and downs, but generally it was like after night 4 and on, it had settled in. And so I just kind of rode that as long as I could, never really thought about it much more than that, despite the fact that I definitely should have. But yeah, I mean, I was always afraid. I was such a little perfect student on the road. I didn't really drink that much. I didn't smoke. I only would smoke weed, not cigarettes. I would only smoke if I had a day off the next day. I would go on vocal rest if need be and not talk to anyone for days. Like, I was Mr. Perfect Little. I have to do as much as I can because what I do is so extreme. I need every ounce of protection I can take. But yeah, and most of that was based in fear. Most of it was like, I'm afraid this isn't going to work, so I have to do all this stuff.
Sure. Yeah. It's such a fragile state of mind when you are vulnerable getting out there doing your thing, singing about songs, but then on top of it, if there's any lack of confidence in your delivery. Like you feel like the most useless human being ever, where you're just like, I'm just ruining all these
such an
songs.
awful feeling. And I'll give you an example of, I don't know if I've ever told this story before, on like a podcast. I'll give you an example of how fearful I was. Okay. We were touring with Bad Religion, and it was supposed to be Against Me. Against Me backed out the last minute, and the Bronx took their spot.
Okay.
And we're a couple weeks into this tour, and I'm just watching the Bronx night in and night out, and they were so good and so alive, and Matt's voice was perfect every night.
Yep.
And I was just in a conversation with the guitar player, and this was about when my voice was really starting to go. So I was very sensitive, very afraid, and very upset, And I pulled the guitar player aside, and I was like, how does Matt fucking sing like that every night? It sounds so good. And he was like, you know what he does? It's like, what? He gargles lotion. And I was like, you're kidding me. I was like, he gargles lotion. I was like, wow. I went out and bought lotion, had it in a bag in the car, and I looked at it and I was like, he was fucking with me. He was 100% fucking with me. And I went up to the next day. I was like, you were fucking with me, weren't you? And he was like, oh yeah, 100%. And then Matt came up and was like, what are you guys talking about? And I was like, I asked him yesterday how you sing so good. He told me you fucking gargle lotion. And I went out and bought a fucking thing of lotion today. And Matt was like, dude, come on. It's like, yeah.
Right.
But that's the state of mind I was in. I would have taken anything to help me sing, to help me do it more. And like, I was so vulnerable at that
Sure.
point. He didn't know that, I'm not saying that to like say he did something. It's hilarious in retrospect, but
right. It wasn't nefarious. It was like, this will be a funny joke we'll play on Jimmy.
Yeah. And he assumed he was talking to a person of sound mind enough to maybe understand that he was fucking with me, but no, totally didn't.
Yeah.
You're that desperate.
You're like, is it 3 parts water? Like, cause I don't think I can get it.
Almost. How? Where do you spit it? What do you do? Yeah.
Totally. Is it just raw? This has to be distilled with something.
No, because like I at that time there was nothing I wouldn't have done. Like I would, when I got sick on the road, I would chew whole chunks of ginger, like raw ginger, and that's nasty. That's just almost unbearable. Like there's nothing I wouldn't have done.
Right.
And just he got me on that one.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Evilgreed.net is the place that you need to point your web browser to shop their awesome site. They are a web store solution provider for bands and record labels to sell their stuff. They're based in Berlin, Germany. They ship worldwide. But let me tell you some of the cool stuff that they do. They have exclusive colors of vinyl that they release. They work with bands of all shapes and sizes, but specifically cool, artistic, heavy stuff. Whether you're into Chelsea Wolfe or Knocked Loose, they have both those bands. And if you're listening to this very podcast, I can guarantee you that you will love what they have to offer. And like I said, based in Berlin, Germany, they ship worldwide. Shipping rates to us here in the United States are totally cheap, all things considered. Like, yes, you're not going to be like $4 for a package, but you get it. And what they do is independently minded. These are all punk and hardcore kids that work there. This is not, some corporate entity where you're buying from faceless people. They are a great company, and I wholeheartedly support them. So go to evilgreed.net and you will be able to find out what the awesome stuff they have for sale right now. Go do it.
Like we were talking about with, Polar Bear Club hitting pretty hard, burning very brightly. And then you guys, like you said, having to kind of recalibrate, not your expectations, because everything was just on this proverbial ride for you guys. But then as you started to be forced to take the band seriously and be like, I guess we have to view this as a business. I guess we're trying to make a living out of this. Did you personally, I mean, I know there was obviously a lot of, churn in band members, and, you and Chris were the proverbial anchors of it all. For you yourself, when you were navigating the business side of the band, was that something that you were attracted to, or you were like trying to remain a healthy distance from it? Or was this something that you and Chris were very simpatico on?
I hate it and still do.
Okay.
It takes all the fun out of it for me. But I'm also the type of person who's like, if I got to get my hands dirty, if something has to get done, I'll certainly do it. But no, God, I hate business. I I just having to even think about some of those things, like, just it was such a chore. But we had good people early on. Like, we had, a good management team that helped with a lot of that stuff, and we had a good tour manager a longtime tour manager that essentially we pawned all that off of. I mean, like, settling and having to strong arm people who were trying to underpay you and that sort of thing. I have no skill set for that and no interest in doing it. Chris is a little bit more money minded, business minded. I mean, he is currently an accountant.
Right.
That's what he does now. So yeah, I think he enjoyed some of it because he was good at it, and I think you kind of like the stuff you're good at too, in a sense, gives you a sense of purpose. And so he liked a lot of that stuff. But like I said, we were doing it at a really interesting time where bands were still not certain if they had to be the ones to do that themselves or if someone else would come along and do it. Now it's abundantly clear, right? You have to do that yourselves. You have to do your own business. You have to do your own marketing, all of that. It's abundantly clear. But at the time that we were doing it, it wasn't as clear. An example I give of this, we didn't we didn't have an Instagram account until the very last year we were a band. And we were still debating it that year, right? So, like, that's the time 6 years before that up until then. I think that was 2013. That was kind of the space. The music industry was very much trying to figure out what it was and what it meant and how to do it all. And, if we were smarter and more, I guess, entrepreneurial, we would have navigated those waters very well and just made those decisions for ourselves and been like, fuck everyone else, we'll just do it all ourselves. We just weren't those people. And so we I don't want to say we struggled with that, but we certainly didn't have an interest in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And true, the way that you're explaining the music industry, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And the interesting part about what you guys were navigating is that you were, a band that had a lot of neighborhoods, but you didn't have homes in the neighborhood. Pardon a terrible, metaphor there, but like, because you guys could play with a lot of different styles of bands, and you guys could go on tour with Warped Tour type bands. You could go on Warped Tour. You could play with hardcore bands. You could kind of do a little bit of everything. But because you didn't necessarily have like a rooting in any particular scene, because you have pulled all these disparate influences, and then it's like, oh yeah, we're releasing records with Bridge 9. People are like, well, you're not a hardcore band. And it's like, oh my gosh. So
Yeah.
anyways, I bring all that up to kind of illustrate the fact that you guys were, in many respects doing this before all of your, title fights and, Balance and Composures, all the bands that kind of were like the next generation after you guys. Was there a lot of, internal, I don't want to say strife, but internal discussion in regards to being like, do we make this move into something, for lack of a better term, more mainstream and not really our scene? Like, did you have a lot of, not arguments, but did you have a lot of discussions about like the tours you were taking and stuff?
Yeah, we always like deliberated a lot about taking the tours that we took. I mean, some were no-brainers, like, oh yeah, we love those bands, let's go on those tours. But the ones that weren't like that, we deliberated very seriously. And the conversation was never like, we need to change in terms of that's I view that more as like the progression of our business, the progression of our music. We never ever were talking about like becoming more like, so we can do this or like that. We were very pure about our music, and the conversation around our music was always more about how do we express more and express better. That was really what it was. How do we become the most expressive that we can be, and whatever that means to us, how do we do that? But we never really talked commercially about our music, and if we did, we certainly would be lauded as quite the failures. But we did deliberate a lot about the tours we took, because we were very principled artists in a sense. And we didn't want to go play with bands we didn't believe in, and we didn't want to associate with them on that way. They're all fine people, I'm sure, maybe some not, but you know what I mean. We didn't want to be associated with them too much, and yeah, we fought a lot, and there was fought is maybe the wrong word, but we deliberated a lot about whether or not we would take certain tours, and if we were on a tour, there was a lot of like compromising about the tours that we took, in the sense of like, well, what else are we going to do? And maybe we'll be able to win over a portion of that audience. It's such a fine balance, because even now, I think this is the case. You can't just completely pave your own way. Like maybe there's some bands that can, but even like I even just saw like Turnstiles playing some awful festival, and it's like they still have to do that, um, and you have to do some of that, but it's a balance, and I think there's no one there guiding you on how to strike the balance right, because the managers, they're financially invested, so they just want you to do everything. They just want you to do absolutely everything. The agent's the same thing. Just do it because it's here, and you don't know what's going to come. So you don't necessarily, there's not necessarily an artistic management process. And that's, I think, the thing that we never really fully figured out. I think we expected at some point someone was going to guide us artistically. And we sought that out when we worked with producers. We wanted pre-production. We wanted producers to help us write songs, and we wanted another ear in the mix. We liked that sort of collaboration. But I think our big failing in the end was missing the fact that we had to do more of that ourselves in a different way than we necessarily did. So, yeah, to your point too about us, the neighborhoods and the houses, I think that too was a, a pro and a con. I mean, at first it was a big pro because it was mysterious. And a lot of the questions around our band, a lot of the enthusiasm around our band early on was based in the question as to, what is this? What is this?
Totally.
What is this? And then there was the second layer too. You hear it, and then you say, what is this? And then you see it, and you say, what is this? Why does it look like this? And that was so fun, that excitement. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I heard in the first years of our band, it's like, you're the singer? It's you? You're the one who sings? I heard that all the time when we were first starting. And that was great and really fun, but that's not sustainable. At a certain point, someone has to answer the question as to what is this, and that someone is the band. And I don't think we ever answered that. And I think that's ultimately why we stopped, is we couldn't answer that.
Sure.
And there's some beauty in that too. Like, it just was what it was. And maybe it was never meant to be answered. But ultimately, the bands that really go for a long time and do it well, they have an answer to that question. They know what it is.
Mhm.
I still don't really know what PVC was, stylistically,
Right.
where it fit in. I don't know. I love that now, but it does not a successful long-term band make,
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Your relationship with touring, I know that many people go through the obvious stages of being like, this is exciting, this is so cool, and then all of a sudden I'm out for 9 months out of the year, and I'm like, I said yes to all these things, but like, this feels different than it did at the beginning. Walk me through your, I guess, relationship with touring. Was it relatively stable the whole time through, or did you reach those, valleys? I know obviously towards the end where it was like, yeah, I'm not built for this anymore. But
Yeah,
how
totally.
was your relationship with it?
Well, always, a certain level of optimism, always. But of course, I mean, felt those feelings of just like, there is this like purgatorial element of it, of just like a Groundhog's Day thing, of just like, I'm just sitting in the car looking out the window, and I'm looking at the tour itinerary. I've got 3 more weeks of this, and then I'm home for 2 weeks, and I've got 4 more weeks in overseas, and then I'm home for 3 weeks, and then I've got 6 weeks on the summer festival circuit. Yeah, that's just daunting. It's just like it's daunting and depressing, and definitely, you know, got very, very depressed at times, and hit it very, very well. But there were years, I mean, where I would get to a venue, show up, unload the gear, and just disappear. Just walk for miles, no plan, no nothing, just walk. I couldn't even stand the thought of hanging out in an empty venue waiting for a show to start. Like, just my body wouldn't allow me to do it. I had to just walk. So of course felt those valleys, and like, this is a term that gets thrown around so much I hesitate to even use it, but I'm very sensitive to other people's emotions, and some people would call that being an empath, whatever you want to say or think of that. I've always sort of thought I was in that realm. And it's a lot. It's a lot being in a van with 6 other people in tight quarters and feeling all of their emotions all the time. It is a lot. And that's the thing that people don't understand from the outside is it's a 24-hour job. It's not a job you ever stop. Yeah, your set is 30 minutes or whatever it is. But the being a band on tour, when you're a musician on tour, you're a musician on tour 24 hours of the day. And it certainly weighed on me, as it did everyone, So yeah, I think the luster of tour waxed and waned. But again, as we were saying, we started out so strong. We had this kind of easy start. So that didn't settle in. We had to come down from that for a while. I mean, at that point, yeah, you feel a little bit of like the homesickness, and we all were in relationships and trying to manage that. You feel that for sure. But then you just go and play an amazing show. And you're like, this is why I'm doing it. Take that out of the equation. Take the amazing show out of the equation. And then you get off stage and you're like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
That definitely, everyone goes through that to different degrees. And we certainly did, for sure.
Sure. Talk to me about the idea you guys pursued, and honestly, I mean, many bands pursue this, and they kind of get, for lack of a better term, stuck as the support band. Because truthfully, like the way that I observed you guys, just as a music industry nerd, where it was like you guys were perpetually supporting these amazing tours, like all of these opportunities that you took, it was like, oh yeah, this makes total sense. Of course, this is great. But then you guys were never able to really articulate your own value from either a ticket sales perspective or being able to stand on your own 2 feet from a touring side of things. And many bands still end up we're like, oh yeah, they're always the 2 out of 5 band because like they're good hangs with people, like all that sort of stuff. So I'm sure, I mean, of course, hindsight's 2020 and you're always looking back and be like, oh man, we should have done a headliner here and a headliner here or whatever. Not saying that you're, auditing your career. But did you, like when you were in that, did you feel like we just constantly get these support opportunities that we can't say no to? So that's what we're going to do.
It felt like a cycle for sure. And It felt like a cycle that we were never going to break from, or with such little breaks from, and yeah, I mean, we were a band's band for a long time too. And I think that helped us get those slots because, we opened for Bring Me to the Horizon because the guitar player loved us. Like that was a thing that happened to us all of the time. Like the band guys loved us and wanted to bring us out and give us an opportunity. And there were great opportunities, but we just didn't know how to break out of that. And I think the answer, really looking back on it, is like, bear down, take command of the ship, and make the best music you can possibly make. But I think at the time where that was like what we had to do, we just didn't have the strength left to do it necessarily. We were limping at that point. It was just me and Chris, and it was just starting to feel like even he and I didn't want, to do that. And we ultimately didn't. I mean, you can boil it all down very simply, right? And it's fun to analyze and talk about it, but at the end of the day, we just didn't want it. We didn't want that life. Ultimately, that's
Yep.
what it was. And like, I remind myself of that because sometimes when you talk about it, you can catch yourself sounding like, I'm really sad that it didn't work out this way. I'm not sad it didn't work out the way. I'm very happy in my life right now, and I'm living the life that I should be living. I certainly had sad times then and wish things went differently then. But ultimately, I'm kind of glad that I'm not 40 and still on the road. Like, of course, it's a different conversation if you're making great money and you're doing great work and et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think I was ever necessarily supposed to do that. I feel so happy, in my house with my family and like with my connections. And I kind of count myself as lucky that it went the way that it did in that sense.
Yep.
But really that was ultimately why we couldn't break out of that circuit is we didn't know how to. We didn't have the confidence to, because this is the downside of coming out of the gate so strong, is we never had to necessarily build our confidence that way. In some ways, yes. I mean, we had tremendous confidence in the sense of like, you've got to go on stage. You're in Austria. There's 7 people there. They look miserable. They're all smoking cigarettes. They're all like old leather punks, and you've got to go play now. And you have to have confidence to do that. Yes. But then there's like this big picture confidence in your point of view as an artist. And we just didn't necessarily have that. We didn't have the strength to tell our team, like, we're doing it this way now. And we're going to go and cancel all that and go and do this. And we're going to go make this and do this, all this stuff. We just weren't those people. And that was really kind of,
Yeah.
part of it, why we couldn't break out of that circuit, is we were just like, well, we don't know how to go do that. So what else are we going to do other than just support these bands all the time?
Yeah, totally. And so transitioning out of that, and I know people, especially when you've built your life around, like, oh yes, of course, Jimmy from Polar Bear Club, like, the identity is intrinsically linked to the art that you create. I know you made the decision and you were excited about that. Was the transition to, lack of a better term, normal life, easy for you? I mean, everything is a degree of difficulty, but like, were you excited to turn that page and be like, wow, I know where I'm going to be, as opposed to I know where I'm going to be the next 9 months because of my touring schedule,
In a sense, yes. I mean, when PBC ended, it ended kind of not interesting, but just Chris called me to tell we had just finished a headlining tour off of our last album that just went okay and just, didn't feel great. And we had a European headliner lined up maybe a couple weeks out. And Chris called me and was just like, I can't go to Europe.
Yeah, no, bro.
I can't go to Europe. And I'm sorry, Jimmy, but like, I can't do this anymore. And I said to him, I was like, buddy, I was calling you tomorrow to say the same thing. I can't fathom how we're going to survive Europe right now. And it ended like that. And I remember exactly where I was when I had that conversation. I was living with my wife in Jersey City, and I like to talk. I have to walk when I talk on the phone. I'm a pacer. And I just was out in the neighborhood, and I just hung up the phone and I just walked, and I felt so light. I felt so light. Yes, I knew that our European booking agent was going to be upset, and I knew all that stuff, and the managers and the label and all that stuff was going to be upset. But when I felt that lightness, I didn't care about any of it. It just felt like a massive weight was lifted. So initially, yes, the feeling of like, I'm not going on tour anymore. I'm home now. Yes, when you first make that decision, if that's what you want to do, feels amazing. Now, complications arise. when you have to relearn how to live at home, especially when you live with someone, and I was with my now wife then and living with her and um, figuring out now how to live together for real, like not for pretend, not for like you're here, we live together for 3 weeks and then you disappear for six, not like that. So there's challenges there. Um, and then of course, what are you going to do with your life? And that was something I wrestled with for a very long time and wrestled hard with like what am I going to do? And I think I felt then that I had to, because I was like Jimmy from Polar Bear Club, I had to do something that made sense, something that like fit the mold of that, something that was as great or as unique or as individualistic. And I was only ever happy again when I let that go. I mean, I was miserable trying to figure that out, and then was happy again as soon as I let that thought go and just started like living my life. I got an office job, and I didn't think about music. I didn't touch a guitar after having, my life be a guitar in my hands writing a song. I didn't touch a guitar for 2.5 years. Put my guitar in the closet, just closed the door, and 2.5 years went by and I didn't even think about it. Started working in an office and just started figuring out how to do that and like what that means, and learned very early how easy that was. Yeah.
Sure.
What a low bar it is to be a good employee. Figured that one out pretty quickly. And then stayed with my sort of career path on that. And that I've been doing a version of that now for 10 years. That's sort of who I am. And it just feels really good now. Like art and money are totally separate to me.
Right.
And that just feels so nice. And I sort of have my cake and eat it too. Like I am a part of my family's life and my friend's life, and I'm still a musician. Like I still am an artist. And that just, you know, that was the answer all along in a weird way.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was years of figuring it out and not thinking about it, and letting it go and holding on to it very tightly and letting it go again. But then when I kind of got back around to it, I started a band. It's called Wax Bottles, and our EP is on Bandcamp. And it was with Nate from Polar Bear Club and his wife Jasmine, and this guy Pierre playing bass, and Benny from Gaslight playing drums, because Benny lived around the corner from me in Jersey City. And the music, we wrote some cool stuff. It never like popped or did anything, but the fun and connection we had making that music, and like the feeling of making it, was so good and so pure. And we all took it seriously, and we had amazing conversations about it and had so much fun playing together. I haven't talked to Benny in a while, but the times that I did talk to him after that, we always talked about like, wasn't that so great? Wasn't that so fun? And it was, and it really did mean a lot to me in like discovering out who I am,
Mhm.
But yeah, it took a while to get there for sure.
Yeah.
Took a while to adjust.
I love when you arrive at that conclusion of the, like you're talking about, the ability to, exist in multiple worlds, where it's just like, yeah, you could be in a band and it doesn't need to be a grind. Like it could be a fun thing, like, and not just the stereotypical way of people that are civilians think, where it's like, oh, you're in a band, like you do cover songs at the local bar. It's like, it's not that. This is something
Yeah.
different.
It does occupy that space of like, it's more serious than a hobby. It's like, it's not a hobby, it's who I am. My job is actually more the hobby than anything else. But yeah, that is tough. That's hard to like, to, you know, have people not take it as seriously because it's not, doesn't fit the mold of whatever. But like, I currently view that as a big challenge, and one that like I'm excited about grappling with. Like, how do I make the music I make now so damn good that no matter what capacity it's being made in, you can't deny when you listen to it, that it's serious.
Yeah.
I'm not there. I don't think that I'm there, but that's that's how I think of it. I
Sure.
think of it as a challenge that I like to work on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's different and interesting and all that stuff. But I think the main difference is like I don't want to knock anyone who does it differently or like has to be on tour to full time to have it feel valid to them. It's all about the person. It's all about like, and the people that can do that, they know it. They know they can do that, and they know the sacrifices, and the reward outweighs the sacrifices. Another super simple way to explain why PBC ended was the reverse of that. The sacrifices no longer, the reward no longer outweighed the sacrifices. It really, simple terms, that's why. And when we started to look inward in ourselves, I think Chris and I and the others who left along the way, you're like, why was that? Why is that? It's like, oh, that's not who we are.
Right.
We are, that was not who we were exactly. And we thought maybe we were people that we weren't necessarily.
Mhm.
And it's kind of beautiful in that way. I don't know.
There you have it. That was Jimmy, and hopefully that was a interesting conversation for you. I just really adore Polar Bear Club, and I was sad that they weren't able to continue on in the trajectory that they had the first couple years of the band, because I truly do think that they were on something special. I definitely think they crawled so the Wonder Years could walk or run, whatever the metaphor is, but you get it. Earnest punk rock. Always will love that. So thank you very much, Jimmy, for coming on. Next week, I have, of course, another great discussion. And this one is also with an old friend. His name is Ken Susi. He played guitar and was the founding member of Unearth. And then he also played in As I Lay Dying for a bit before that whole thing fell apart again. But Ken is an incredibly sweet and endearing dude, but also is a party animal. And in many respects is as the guy that sucks the oxygen out of the room. And normally those people are really annoying. Ken rides the perfect line of not being that. And so I had to have Ken on because he is not only a great storyteller, but a wealth of experience with independent music. And I love Unearth. And that's where I met him, and I spent many years alongside of him. So that's what we got. Until then, please be safe, everybody.